Yeah,
Although
never been, but everybody I've
I
heard.
don't like going into work between April and like October. It's nice here.
Half and half.
I get it. I've only been there for a few years.
There, be the best weekend when they come to me. Ever gone. In fact, when it's a crappy weekend, about 3 o'clock, usually the sun comes out.
No, that's how Sundays are, and I'm always antsy to get out on Sundays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning. We're going to convene the county board for May 19th, 2026. If you'd arise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2 is amendments to the agenda. I don't believe we have any amendments to the agenda. Item 3 is to approve the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 4 is new employees. We had the privilege of meeting with a couple of new employees this morning, and they're going to come up and just introduce themselves. The two, Sebastian and Morgan. Oh, and there's a third that we didn't meet earlier. They're going to say their name and where they worked and one little known fact about themselves, just like 15, 20 seconds worth. Go ahead.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Sebastian. I'm the new Assistant Veteran Service Officer with Veteran Services. Served 10 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard. Fun fact is I am less fluent than I used to be, but fluent in Spanish.
Thank you.
My name is Morgan Soley. I'm working in the county attorney's office. One nice fun fact about me is I was the first in my family to get a college degree.
All right, congratulations. All right, I guess that's the two that we have. Welcome. And one thing we shared with them is that we view and want to have the Scott County employees and all of us be like a family, where we spur each other on, we encourage each other, we pull for each other. If something is not working well, we talk about it, we bring it forward and allow supervisor of the board to correct it. But we really want that to be true. And so that's one of the themes we presented to the new employees this morning. Item 5 is recognition of interested citizens, and this is limited to items that are not on the agenda, and it's usually 5 minutes per person per subject, and any speaker is encouraged to approach the microphone for the benefit of the viewers, the many, many viewers at home, which are about 5, I think. But anyhow, anybody wanting to speak this morning? Anybody wanting? Now, some boards, they repeat this 3 times. I don't know that we have to repeat that 3 times. We're not going to do that. Okay, we're on to item 6, consent agenda. These are deemed as non-controversial and usually pass as one motion. Any item can be pulled for a separate discussion. And I'll read the consent agenda. Item 6.1 is adopt resolution number 2026-90, acknowledging receipt and acceptance of gifts to Scott County. 6.2 is to adopt resolution 2026-101, authorizing final payment to Valley Paving, Inc. for the 2025 pavement preservation program bid package A. 6.3 is adopt resolution number 2026-102, approving a conditional use permit for a private indoor riding arena. David Martin and Jody Martin, applicants and property owners. 6.4, adopt resolution 2026-103, authorizing into an agreement with Allied Blacktop Company for the 2026 crack sealing project. 6.5 is to adopt resolution 2026-105, authorizing 2 lawful gambling off-site premises permits for Chaco Valley Amateur Hockey Association. 6.6, adopt resolution number 2026-107, authorizing a lawful gambling off-site premises permit for Shakopee Dollars for Scholars. 6.7, adopt resolution number 2026-108, authorizing final payment to SM Henches and Sons, Inc. for the Moraine Addition Housing Trust Project. 6.8, adopt resolution 2026-109, authorizing enter an agreement with Executive Outdoors for lawn care services. 6.9, adopt resolution number 2026-110, authorizing into an agreement with the Met Council for development of players at Cedar Lake Farm and Clearly Lake Regional Parks. 6.10, adopt resolution 2026-111, authorizing entering a cooperative agreement with Three Rivers Park District for development of players at Cedar Lake Farm and Clearly Lake Regional Parks. 6.11, adopt resolution 2026-112, approving a 3-year agreement with the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 332 Sheriff's Licensed Essential Sergeant Bargaining Unit. 6.12 is adopt resolution number 2026-113, approving a 3-year agreement with the Minnesota Public Employees Association Essential Public Public Safety Telecommunicators. 6.13, adopt resolution number 2026-114, approving a 3-year agreement with the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 157 Sheriff's Licensed Essential Employee Bargaining Unit. 6.14, approve payroll processing of personal actions. And 6.15 is approve records of disbursement and claims. That's our consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make that motion?
Second.
We have an motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the playgrounds, play areas for Cleary Lake and Cedar Lake Farms. I know that the one at Cleary Lake is nearing the end of life, and the one at Cedar Lake Farms is people really want one down there. So I appreciate the work that the staff has done to get that taken care of.
Okay, any more comments or? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 7.1, it is to receive information on Scott County Delivers. The topic is community safety. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I appreciate the time, as always, to have an opportunity to discuss data and outcomes. Today's discussion highlights a strength, I think, of Scott Delivers, because this is a very broad topic that brought in a lot of people from different departments. Today's topic is community safety, and when people hear that at first, they might think public safety, so our folks in law enforcement. And while that's a very important topic, today's topic and narrative is focused on really community safety, safety by design. What is the county's role in thinking about and planning in safety from the design and from the get-go? A value, of course, of the county is to be more efficient and effective by planning things in a way that has better outcomes for all people involved. So I want to thank the panelists for being here today and for contributing to the packet. And if we could, we'll start off with our names and titles, please. Katie Mollica, Quality Improvement.
Jennifer Schultz, Library Director. Brittany Lane, Aging and Disability Services.
Scott Head, Accounting Manager.
Joe Wida, Highway Operations.
Jeremy Schuessler, Building Official.
Scott Hudds, the Director of Emergency Management and Communications.
Mark Callahan, Traffic Engineer.
John Rudolph, Assistant Traffic Engineer.
Joan Anderson, Environmentalist.
Lisa Brodsky, Public Health Director.
Natalie Halverson, Public Health Supervisor.
Thank you. Any initial questions from the commissioners before we jump in and start asking ours?
No, why don't you just take it away?
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, Jen, if you'll start us off.
Absolutely. Well, good morning. Thank you all, as Katie said, for being here. As I read through the packet and the information, which thank you all, that was a lot of work. It was a big packet this time and very detailed. And I'm always surprised when I look at the packets and look at other people's work that I don't consider every single day in my own work. And so as I was going through it and thinking, reading it and kind of understanding it, I kept going back to that idea of safety by design, which I think is was identified in the packet. And I kept thinking about that as county, as departments, we do a lot and value that preventative work, that planning work to try to keep things safe. All of you are doing that every day. But yet, when it actually comes to the outcomes or the impacts, there's things that get in the way, like acts of God, human behavior, that then has an impact on the outcomes that you guys present. So I wonder if, like, for example, we can do all the right things on the road, but people may still drive distracted, or they may drive impaired, or they go too fast. So I just wonder if we could start today's kind of conversation by asking each of you from your respective areas about how do you think about that in terms of your day-to-day operations, balancing that preventative planning work, then along with how do you balance that human behavior or those acts of God things. And again, maybe just give you each a chance from your areas to consider that.
Who wants to start?
What do you want to start on?
I can start. I don't mind starting. From my perspective, like, the code is set up to prevent natural disasters destroying completely a home and neighborhoods. There's nothing you can do if it's a super severe storm, obviously, but it's designed to help prevent total destruction of a house and prevent the life safety, to protect the life safety of people. So that's how I look at it every day. I go out there and doing our job. Well, that's what we're trying to prevent. So
I would say from a traffic perspective, we're always looking to try to make improvements, maintaining our signing, our pavement markings, maintaining our traffic signal timing and optimization. One thing we get a lot of is calls from the public, and sometimes they see things that we don't see. I just took a call recently about a person who said she's experienced someone that's driving the wrong way on our County Highway 44. So if there's some signing that we can do to help prevent that, we take their calls very seriously. They're more or less the experts in their neighborhood, so we value their input and try to respond to whenever they give us a call to try to improve our system.
I'll jump in. I think the biggest thing that the question really makes me think about is that, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, we have a very significant moving target. A lot's changed in society. A lot's changed even environmentally. We went through, a period of drought where we measure, and I've just been talked about it, many of these, but we measure normal rainfall in a 10-year period, and we went through the early 2000s with some really significant rainfall years. So the standards then for building and things like wastewater retention ponds all gets bigger because of that. We're just seeing a shift environmentally. We're seeing a shift in, I can't drive home without seeing at least 3 or 4 people on their phones while they're driving. Every single day. Every single day. And the people going through red lights. The human behavior is changing, the environment's changing. So for me, I think the biggest thing is understanding that we have really a moving target on how we behave. And I think we see the outcomes of that in many ways. Things where we make investments that should be improving safety, and sometimes the change in behaviors is actually worse than the improvements that we're making. So we can actually see some worse outcomes, even though some of the work we're doing is reducing. If we weren't doing that preventative work, the outcomes would be even worse. So there is a benefit, but it's really difficult to measure that. So I think from a perspective of this presentation, I think it's really difficult for us to, in many ways, quantify the impacts of what we're doing effectively because the world's changing.
From a public health perspective, we're all about prevention and early intervention. Not that we have the corner of the market, because really there's a lot of prevention that everybody does every day. But a lot of our work focuses on that. I would say, piggybacking on what Scott said, in emergency preparedness, we can't talk about acts of God. We can't prevent a tornado, obviously. I wish we could, but we can help the community prepare in case there is one. So then the after effects are reduced. We can do early intervention. For example, if we had somebody in our community that had been exposed to hantavirus, which is a current event in our county, we have systems in place to make sure that the exposures are contained, that people are educated. In a flood, we obviously, in some cases, we can't prevent the flood, but we teach people how to respond to that flood, so now they don't have a public health nuisance and that they have mold all over their homes. In public health nuisance cases, we do some early intervention. So we've discovered the nuisance, but we try and prevent it from spreading throughout the whole neighborhood. Because especially if it's critters, they don't follow those property lines. So just a lot of focus on early intervention and mitigating worse outcomes. And how do you measure that? Well, I could tell you how many, if it is measurable, how many public health nuisances didn't impact a whole entire neighborhood, or how many, but I can't tell you how many hantavirus cases we didn't prevent. Do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say more broadly, we work to make the healthy choice the easy choice through policies, systems, and environmental changes. Healthy eating policies in schools, trying to make healthy foods more affordable and accessible through community gardens, working with communities to improve walkability, and all of that is done through community design. And so that's another way that public health supports people in making healthier choices.
I can go next. For environmental, I think a lot of it is education. People understand they probably shouldn't burn their waste, or they shouldn't bury it. But then from there, they get a little confused about what to do next. And so really for us, a lot of it is getting out there to provide education for businesses and homeowners on what to do with that waste safely to get rid of it. And then as far as, for instance, in a natural disaster, it's being a place where they can safely then get rid of those wastes. So our household hazardous waste facility and help prevent further risk from those hazards being there.
I think daily we are performing preventative maintenance in preparation to be as prepared as we can for a natural disaster. Maintaining our storm sewer systems and our centerline culverts, making sure they're clean, flowing. We ditch thousands of feet of our ditch system yearly to make sure that the flow is correct on those. And then also basic tree trimming, several hundred hours a year trimming trees, making sure that if the winds do come, they're not falling on our road and disrupting the traveling public.
It sounds like there's a lot of great work already being done to address safety, really from a collaborative. There's so many different departments that are all working on it. I'm curious more about the safety by design concept. How do you see that showing up in your work today? But more importantly, I'm curious if you can talk about where you see the greatest untapped opportunity when we think about safety by design in your work.
I guess from a traffic's perspective, my focus would probably be toward pedestrians and motorcycle safety. In preparation for this meeting, John and I looked at some of the crashes that have been going on our system, and pedestrian is a focus area that we need to make improvements on, I think. Also, motorcycle crashes seem to be overrepresented in Scott County compared to motorcycle crashes statewide, which is kind of a surprise to me. So I think those would be two focus areas for me moving forward, is to maybe reach out to the motorcycle community in Scott County, and also to review safety improvements for pedestrians, e-bikes and things like that.
One of the newer initiatives that we just restarted about a week ago is, and I don't know if it's the greatest untapped, but we revitalized the Scott County Safe Roads Coalition in relationship to that. And one of our plans is to do motor vehicle fatality review for the past couple of years and try and identify if there's any trends there where we can focus on some prevention and mitigation activities, not just from a traffic safety perspective, but also from a public health perspective, from a law enforcement perspective, and see if we can make some differences there to create a safer community.
From the emergency management perspective, one of the, I think, biggest untapped opportunities to move forward is increasing the link between planning and zoning and then the emergency management role. Historically, they've been very separate, but if we look at where we have, especially the recurring damage locations, it all comes back to planning and zoning, and it's not just like where we build houses. If we look at, a few years ago, we had a big entertainment venue that we had to think about pulling a permit for because of some problems. The emergency management cycle was implemented and we did an after action. We talked to community members, we talked to facility owners, and we tried to get them to understand the problems and then fix their problems, and ultimately that led to some documentation that led to some creation of some solutions. But we looked at over parking, we looked at poor staffing of the parking lots, and those were honestly pretty easy to solve problems. But we've had this disconnect over the years of tying those requirements from a planning and zoning perspective to the role of emergency management, where we then oftentimes end up being more consequence management. One of the challenges we have as a county is that planning and zoning for the county has a limited overview over townships and not necessarily what the cities do. So we see developments that will be in areas that we know are gonna flood at some point and occurring in our cities, and we know that that's gonna create problems. And I can recall when I was a deputy back in 2008, I ended up deploying down to Winona County where I grew up, and same thing happened. Area that was, chronically flooding. A developer bought that cheap land and then built houses, and then all these people lost their investments. So there's a connection there that I think is necessary, that we somehow find a way to connect in, especially with the cities and their zoning, because the developers are gonna make money. That's their goal. The cities, are gonna look to increase their tax base. But if we're doing so in a way that's actually creating more harm over the long run or creating harm to a community, that's something we have to find a way to do an early intervention to.
I would say one area that I think there could be growth for building inspections is it's really a statewide code that's adopted by the state, but it's not enforced everywhere. There's certain counties that don't have like a building department that enforces or does building inspections at all. They really just have like a planning and zoning department that would issue permits for where a building would go, but there's nobody out there really inspecting those buildings. So I think that's an area of growth for the state in general to broaden where the code enforcement is required. It's really only required in the 7 metro counties. So that's where I would go.
All right, I'll go with the next question. And it's for public health for Natalie and Lisa. I saw some of the slides you had about public nuisance and whatever. Just wondering what some of the top 2 or 3 areas of focus you've had over the last years, and maybe some success stories you've had?
Related to public health nuisances?
Yes, to public health specifically.
There's a lot of stories when it comes to public health nuisance. We've had over 100 in the past 10 years. There are some trends, but each case is very unique. In the past 2 months, for the first time ever, we've had 3 animal nuisance complaints. They were all cats, and within those 3, it represents 60 cats. They're just all so unique and unusual, and we just never know when it's going to happen. I think one of our biggest successes I'll share is, first of all, we work very closely with the cities. They have been, every city has had a public health nuisance. They have had some very significant ones that they had struggled with for years and years. And we had one in Prior Lake that they had been struggling with for over 10 years. It was a blight on the neighborhood. This is a very wealthy neighborhood with $1 million homes. And we were able to work with the homeowner just to get the outside cleaned up. There was a lot of garbage on the outside, and in that one in particular, we were able to remove a broken down vehicle and 10 truckloads of garbage that was outside of the home. The garbage was also had food products in it, so it was attracting raccoons and other animals. And that had really, the city had been struggling with it for almost 10 years, and the neighborhood was very appreciative. We still are, well, we were up until a few months ago still involved with the homeowner. Unfortunately, it's not just a one and done. We were trying to get inside the home to help them clean up. It never worked out, but then the property was sold and a developer came in and fixed up the home. So that was resolved. There was a cost. We have actually only had two in 10 years where we actually had to bring in a company to clean up and to the county's expense. When the Prior Lake home sold, we were paid back for the county's expense, so we became whole, and it fixed up the issue in the neighborhood.
I was thinking more broadly than just public nuisance kind of issues, but is it, like, are you focusing on mental health, you know? Whatever, just
Thank you.
overall for public health?
I'll turn that over to Natalie.
Sure. So in 2024, we completed our community health assessment, and through that process, we identified 3 priorities to work on for the next 5 years. So those are substance use and mental health, chronic disease prevention and management, and then access to healthcare, housing, and transportation. All of those connect back to community design. So safe, healthy, walkable communities are, provide access to services, transportation, housing, and help improve mental health, chronic disease, and resilience, and create safer communities. And through that process, we have identified and created a 5-year plan, as I mentioned, and have work groups now established around each of those. So we have really good representation from community partners across the county involved in all 3 of those work groups, and invite others to still join. They just kicked off this year, so we're making really good progress on those.
Excellent, thank you.
Lisa, just to follow back up, when you were talking about the costs, who generally bears those costs? Is it the homeowner? Is it the city? You said sometimes it's like a couple times it's been us, but then we've recouped costs. Can you just talk about the cost of those
Certainly.
cleanups a little bit?
Yeah, 99% of the time, it really just involves us contacting the homeowner, property owner, and saying, you need to clean this up, you have 10 days. So far, except for in 2 cases, they had the means and the ability, and it was taken care of. So the homeowner, it's really the burden of the homeowner, because they are typically the cause of the issue, and they have to clean it up. There was just the 2 cases where we had to go in, and because it was so extreme, we bared the cost, but we are able to put it back on the taxes. So it does, we do get paid back. And we do that because it's impacting other houses at this point. That's typically where we draw the line. If it's starting to create a problem for other homes in the neighborhood, aside from it's an eyesore, because we do have quite a few eyesores, but if it's starting to cause damage to other homes, we will step in. But otherwise, it really has been the burden of the homeowner. One of the things that we are trying that's coming up next, we're working with the county attorney to establish some fees or some fines, because some of these homes are so extreme, and we don't have public health nuisance staff. We have your public health director who is going out and crawling into people's homes, and a public health supervisor. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's probably one of my most interesting things that to do. But some of these homes, it's not just a one and done. It's a multiple visits, and we don't really want to go in and clean up and do a complete cleanup, because there's mental health issues involved. This is a mental health issue. I can't say that enough. People don't go out and say, I'm gonna just let my home rot. Something traumatic happens in their life, and we don't want to make it worse, where we go in and traumatize them further by taking all their precious stuff, because these are typically a lot of it is hoarding, and this is stuff that's very near and dear to them, and they don't want to part with it. So, and if we do that, we'll be back in 6 months doing it again. So we work with the homeowner, we try and get them connected to family or to resources, but it requires 10, 12, sometimes in some cases 20 visits. And in some cases, they're dragging their feet, and I'll say 10 days, and I'm not gonna go in after 10 days. I just need to see some progress is being made. And we connect them to resources as often as we can, and we try and get them home care, home chore services if they qualify. We try and get them a Min Choices assessment. So we look for other resources and only use a cleanup as a final resort. And again, in over 100 cases, we've only had to do that twice in 10 years. So it's really rare that that happens.
Thank you.
I have two kind of quick questions. The first one is from the road and trail system narrative on the bottom of page 2. The last bullet says, strong performance across sign management, pavement markings, and guardrail condition reflects deliberate investment in asset management practices. And I'm just curious if that pun was intended. I appreciated it. You don't really have to answer that, but going to public health, on page 4, it talks about public health has really cultivated, and I know this to be true, cultivated a lot of long-term community partnerships that really has had some positive results. And Natalie, I'm curious if you could just tell us a little bit more about how have you been so successful in both cultivating and maintaining really strong community partnerships?
Well, across all of our teams, I'm speaking specifically to health promotion, which includes child and teen checkups, emergency preparedness, statewide health improvement partnership, and drug-free communities. We are deeply involved in our communities and sit on over, I think it's 75 boards and committees across the county. So it's something that we track through our performance management, the number of partnerships that we hold. Those that are new every year, we have goals with our staff around the number of partnerships that they create each year. So I think having measurement around partnerships helps drive that engagement.
Thank you.
I just want to add also, I feel Scott County is very unique in the sense that we have a lot of partners that want to be part of the solution. They want to help. Fish is unique, but we also have, all of our nonprofits. We have been doing nonprofit workshops. They are caring and so dedicated. So it really has been a joy and a pleasure to work with them, because when we have these we have work groups, they are coming to the table saying, what can we do? How can we help? And that really makes it easier for us.
I know in preparation for this, there was a lot of discussion about how, stronger together and there's collaboration and how the lines are really blurred in a response to some like situations. I was wondering if any of you could share a time that just kind of highlights that collaboration, whether that's within the county or with our community partners, and how the outcome was better because of it.
I'll talk again. I'll use an example that we talk a lot about, and we haven't maybe mentioned recently, but during the COVID response, a lot of partners came to the table. It was a joint response. Emergency management led the broader response. Public health led we gave over 50,000 vaccinations. We had community partners that helped. We had outreach being done by MICASA. We had outreach being done by the CRC, the Community Resource Center, to help us reach some cultural communities that might not have been as trusting. We had the fabulous partner with Canterbury who let us use their space. We had other partners that allowed us to go in, assisted livings, lot of different homes. I mean, that required an entire community response. And people came to the table. We had hundreds of Medical Reserve Corps volunteers, hundreds of volunteers from CARA, and we had the whole county there. So I think the collaboration and cooperation led for a very organized response. We gave more vaccinations than Hennepin County, and we are tiny compared to Hennepin County. I mean, we also, like, people were coming from all over the community, all over the metro. Actually, I would say all over the state, because I looked at our data, to get vaccinations because those were run so smoothly. So I think that's a good example. Do you want anything to add on that?
I think that, you know, we think internally, there's so many partnerships that we do on a daily basis. I don't think we even really think about it. Like Mark and I have had, I don't know how many meetings where we talk about elements, everything from the advanced traffic management system and how that works across the board. As we're sitting here next to each other, it's like, well, this is what we do. And I think part of that's culturally significant for Scott County. That's, I believe, and this is my opinion on this, but I believe that because we were a smaller county with very limited resources and we experienced that hypergrowth in the early 2000s, it got ingrained in our culture that we're not the bureaucratic Hennepin County, where you have divisions upon divisions upon divisions and you can't figure out who works with who because nobody works with anybody. We're so used to these day-to-day, hey, if I got a question, I know who to talk to. If there's a need for something, we reach out and it's a quick now Teams call or meeting. This is, I think, ingrained in the culture of this county, and I think it's one of the parts that ultimately makes us stronger and needs to really be reinforced as we continue to evolve as a county. Having this normalized is so important, because whether it's me just being able to reach out to Joe and ask a question, or when something bad does happen, I mean, Joe and I are on the phone with each other all the time. It's just the way it is. Like, having those relationships ahead of time and having this be normalized, I think makes us stronger, and when we do really need something, when something bad's happened, those relationships are already there and they're used on a daily basis, and I think that's really important. And it's just a lot of simple things, like Amanda and Caitlin from Public Health, they come to our emergency management team meetings once a month, just regular basis that they're there once a month, and that's good for us because we get perspective that we wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. And it's good for them because now we have common goals, and when we're doing exercises, of course we want them to join and participate in our exercises. This is just, I think, culturally who we are, and I think it makes us stronger.
I think SHIP is another really good example of a collaborative project, the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership. It engages a lot of community partners. We give out probably a third of our dollars in mini grants, and it helps create, the partners come to the table, and they, for example, we have funded things like the food pantries, the startup costs of the food pantries, and the partners agree to take it on after that. So we have really increased opportunities in the community through these partnerships, so we don't have to do it, right? Like that's the goal, is to increase the resilience and the capacity of the community to do these things. The community gardens, we just really kind of do the initial startup and some coordination, and they agree to take this on, and they put in a lot of money themselves as well. We just give them a little bit of skills and the impetus. We work also with the food shelves to help create spaces to make it easier for people to make the healthy choices. So it really is a community approach to safe, healthy, livable.
I'm going to shift gears for a moment, and I have a couple questions related to environmental health. So if you look at pages 24 and 25, the graphs, I'm just hoping somebody can kind of talk through probably an area that I don't know a ton about. If I look at the graph, it looks like the number of inspections have decreased, so I have a question around that. And then if I look at 25, it looks like the number of significant violations has increased. So I just was hoping somebody could kind of talk through those two pieces. Also, kind of provide some information about what constitutes a significant violation. Has that changed? What's that look like over the last couple of years?
Sure. So we go out and we inspect businesses for hazardous waste, and we're looking for proper disposal of waste. So significant violations are generally things where we're seeing waste mismanaged. So it's going down the sewer, it's, we're finding spills and leaks on the ground outside. Waste is going into the garbage that's hazardous and shouldn't be. And so those are specific ones that, you know, are high concern for mismanagement. The last couple years, we've had a couple different things happening. We've had turnover in our department. And of course, you have to backfill those positions till you get them trained. And for a sewer inspector, it takes about a year to get them trained. So it's a long time to be able to replace that person. So we've had, so that pulls away from being able to do inspections. Also, at the same time, during the summer, you know, when sewers and our HHW get busy, that also pulls away from being able to do those hazardous waste inspections. And businesses don't complain when they don't get inspected. It's not their favorite. So, so we're working on that. We also have been working on an online program for hazardous waste to do reporting. And so this last year, we spent quite a bit of time implementing that, which also took away from the inspections. So, and inspections for us are very important because we do a large amount of education during our inspections. Like I talked about earlier, a lot of times mismanagement is really due to not understanding the rules. And so we really want to be out there, provide education and a resource to keep those wastes from getting mismanaged in the first place and hopefully catch it in the front. So it's an ongoing process. We always have more businesses coming into the county. And we keep trying to get out there and provide the education and assistance that they need. But it you know, it tends to correlate. The longer the time between an inspection, the more likely you have violations. So, and oftentimes the more serious the violation.
Thank you.
I have a question for the transportation people here. On slide 16, talks about the fatal and serious injury crashes and the factors. You know, the intersections stand out on there, but I think if I read on the slide that there can be multiple factors that were contributing to that. Just wondering about for intersections themselves, is it really a combination of multiple factors? And what really can be done to make an intersection safer, or is it mostly driven by driver behavior on these crashes?
Well, normally, we limit the contributing factors of a crash to the two most prevalent that the officer would note. So for intersections, probably one would be misinterpretation of the signage. For instance, flashing yellow arrows. When at those type intersections where we have flashing yellow arrows, I think some of the people misinterpret that as their ability to make a free left turn when actually they're supposed to yield to traffic. So we do have signing in place that explains their need to yield for that kind of a situation. I think another situation is just inattentiveness and speeding would be probably the two biggest contributing factors to intersection crashes beyond people misinterpreting the flashing yellow arrow. So you kind of study that as well. I don't know if you have additional comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it. So, you know, the other thing is, you know, there could be younger drivers, you know, not familiar with the road, you know, or kind of new to driving and, you know, misunderstanding rules of the road, that kind of situation.
I don't know to what extent this plays a role, but Scott County is kind of a destination county. We have a lot of people coming to Valley Fair, Canterbury Park, Mystic Lake from outside the county. So they may not be quite as familiar with the roadway system as they come in and driving into and out of the city or the county. So that may also play a role, that we get a number of people from outside the county that aren't as familiar as maybe people would be in other counties.
Is there anything from a design perspective with intersections that you specifically look for, or is it just the signage that you'd mentioned, or?
There are probably a couple things that we could do. If we notice people are running red lights, we could maybe extend the signal timing for an all red to get people through that intersection before opposing traffic starts to enter the intersection. So that'd be one thing we could do if we notice a pattern at a specific intersection.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to comment, it's important to look at the data and to know, like, I just happened recently during our meeting last week to note that 16% of our fatals are related to substance abuse and 16% are from texting and driving. So if we can just prevent those two things, like, our roads would be so much safer, we would have a lot less fatals. And so, but human error is there, and I think being a destination county, we are gonna still have some of those, particularly the substance use, related to some of our events. So there's still a lot of prevention work to be done, as well as community design and road safety design.
Kind of switching topics, but going back to towards the end of the packet, about page 36, 37, it talks about like the commercial plans for buildings. And Jeremy, I'm just wondering if you could talk to us about, so it's the state deciding building codes, and is that right? And then are those appropriate? I know as time goes on, things change. Are they arduous for you to like implement and ensure people are compliant with? I guess just, is that a right fit?
Yeah, so it's a statewide adopted code. They typically adopt a new code they're supposed to do it every 6 years. We're on like maybe the 7th year since the last code cycle. It was supposed to be updated this year, but it looks like it's gonna be 2027. There's typically not a ton of changes in the code necessarily. But it can be, I mean, there's several books when you're talking about the code in general. It's a lot to know and a lot to learn. But we do the training, we do a lot of training every year. We send all of our inspectors go to on-site training, and then they do a lot of virtual training too, to keep up with the codes. There's a lot of time, like, because we're gonna be in a transition, there'll be transition training, like what's the difference between the 2018 code and the 2024 code or whatever, because we're based off of ICC model code, and then Minnesota amends that to adopt their own code. So I think I answered your question. Yeah.
Do you hear, Jeremy, from homeowners how that impacts, if that's changing every 6 or 7 years? How is that impacting residents? And what are you hearing from residents?
I don't really hear much from the residents, more from the contractors trying to understand the differences, and a lot of the changes tend to be in the energy code. And it can be very confusing even for our inspectors to understand what's required in what situation. So it's important for people, if they are building or doing something, to have good contractors that understand the code, or good architects and engineers that can design it. That helps a lot with our review too. Makes it much simpler for us to just verify instead of trying to teach everyone the code every time you're having a conversation. So.
I'm wondering if we can go back to slide 29. This is about the Scott County drug drop boxes. It's listed under public health. It looks like there's some Scott County Sheriff data in here too. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit more about the program. There's been, I was very amazed to see the number of pounds collected. So I'd like to hear more about that, and I'm curious if there is an environmental health tie-in to this. I'm making some assumptions there, but wondering if you all would speak to that.
I
can speak to it a little bit. Through our Drug Free Communities grant and also in partnership with Choose Not to Use, we funded several new Take It to the Box prescription drug drop boxes that are located at police departments across the county over this past year. And there are great resources in the community. People look for them. They reach out to us weekly asking about where they can bring prescription medications, and so we provide that information to the community. Part of that work is also providing doTERRA bags out in the community. So we, those are just bags that have charcoal in them. You put your prescription medications in them, add some water, and it deactivates the medication, and you can put it in into your garbage. And so we provide hundreds of those in the community every year, which is partly why there's a drop in the pounds because of the doTERRA bags. The Environmental Health Connection, we are partnering with them this year on vape disposal kits in every high school and middle school across the county. So those are being distributed right now, so we'll have more data over this year on the number of vapes that are collected in schools as well.
And the purpose of the program is to really get those unused medications out of medicine cabinets. One of the number one places that kids access particularly prescription medication and opioids, is their grandparents' medicine cabinets. Hundreds of unused sit in bottles, sit in those cabinets. Kids get access to them. Grandparents and parents don't even know that they're actually accessing them. And we also don't want them flushing them down the toilet because then it gets in the water system. Treatment plants are not designed to fully remove those pharmaceuticals, so it's bad for the environment. And we also don't just want them tossing them as is in the trash. So we do collect them. They're at the police station. Some people aren't comfortable with going to the police station to drop off their medications, and that's why we also make doTERRA bags available. But the safer way is through the boxes because those get incinerated safely by environmental and hazardous waste companies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
thank you. So the best option is the take it to the box, because then we know it's getting properly disposed. But as Lisa said, the risk is very high. So, if the doTERRA bags get it out of the home and not flushed, then that's an important alternative. Also, take it to the box is nice because when we're going out and inspecting pharmacies, other healthcare facilities, homeowners are saying, where can I get rid of these medications? What do I do with them? And so then we can give them the information and send them to take it to the box and say, here, please hand this out. You can do this. So it's a great for all around.
I had a question I'm not sure if this would be Scott or the trans area, but just wondering about the challenges with e-bikes these days. The other day I was walking and had a close call with an e-bike. I saw another teenager on a scooter while he was texting too. Now that was over in Lakeville, so I'm sure the teenagers in Scott County are much better behaved. But can you talk about some of those challenges?
Yeah, I'll start, and I think Mark will be able to input on this one as well. So we've seen this really rapid change where now e-bikes, e-scooters, everything is everywhere, and the law has not kept up. I live in Prior Lake, and many times the number of e-bikes on the streets near my house exceeds the number of vehicles on the areas, and I think the situation you explained is repeated way too many times. There are rules that define what an e-bike is. There's a lot of what people are buying thinking they're e-bikes that are not actual e-bikes, they're motorcycles. And those are being driven on the roads. That is not legal, but it's all over the place. I see it in my neighborhood all the time. I will see juveniles who are under 15, so they aren't supposed to be on them to begin with because 15 is the requirement in law. And these are e-bikes, but they don't have pedals on them, which tiers them into the motorcycle category. So these are unlicensed motorcycle drivers on our city streets, on our county roads. And these are people without a license. Obviously, they're not old enough to drive, and they definitely don't have a motorcycle endorsement. It's a high risk. E-bikes are a high risk from a traffic concern, but they're also a huge risk on the fire side of things. Because of the batteries inside, there's a number of house fires and apartment fires that are starting because of overcharging of e-bikes and e-scooters. The batteries aren't regulated the same way that you would have a car battery regulated. And a lot of these products are imported, and that then ties into environmental on how these get disposed of. So it's actually a great example because it covers all of our areas across the board here. Education's something that you've seen, I'm sure a lot of the police departments are really actively trying to clarify with people. But there's nothing that forbids somebody from purchasing what they think is an e-bike, giving it to their 12-year-old and having their 12-year-old drive down the highway with it. So we have a real gap right now. And ultimately what's going to happen is there will be some larger public outcry when the news starts covering how many kids are being seriously hurt and killed because they're having crashes with e-bikes. And it's gonna be a horrible outcome that no one wants to see. So the law hasn't kept up, education hasn't kept up, and the marketing of these has become so savvy that they're everywhere.
I'll add that our statewide health improvement partnership team, SHIP team, is working with schools and Three Rivers Parks and also Alina Health to develop some parent educational information around e-bikes and the laws and safety tips and buying these for their youth and hope to have a community event around e-bike safety.
I believe we have a similar meeting set for November on highway safety that will probably have more to share regarding pedestrians and e-bikes. I would just speak anecdotally from what I've observed driving the road myself. I just remember an instance I was driving along Highway 82 eastbound, and I saw an approaching westbound e-biker on the opposite side of the intersection that I was approaching. I was just surprised at how fast that e-biker was able to get to the intersection. And had he decided to cross the intersection in front of me, I probably wouldn't have had time to stop. And technically, I believe I would have been at fault because the pedestrian has a right-of-way at intersections to cross the highway. So certainly it's a concern. I know this probably happens with other motorists as well. So I've also reviewed some crash reports that involve e-bikes. So just anecdotally, I agree with Scott. It's certainly is a concern. I think for our presentation in November, I think we'll have more to share.
So Mark or Scott, I have a question on that. Is a bike, when they're riding it, considered a pedestrian? I thought they more had to follow vehicle laws than pedestrian laws. So how would that play out in a situation like that? I'm just kind of curious because I've seen that question asked.
I don't know specifically the answer to that, Leslie.
And I'll just say, I think there's some vagueness in how it's been written in statute, and this is what I referred to with the laws haven't kept up. There's vagueness because in some ways, I believe it's been a little while since I've been writing tickets and really focused on this area, but bikes have certain rules and authority on a road when they're traveling. And a lot of our bicyclists don't necessarily even understand, like, you can't have 3 wide on a highway, but you can have 2 wide. But you do have to stay to the very far right side of the lane, or shoulder, as far right as you can be. A lot of non-powered bicyclists don't necessarily understand those rules. With e-bikes, it's just the laws haven't kept up. So what they're classified as to, honestly, I don't know.
I mean, just even a bike, my understanding was if a bicyclist gets off and walks their bike in a crosswalk, they're considered a pedestrian. But if they're riding through it, they're considered more having to follow vehicular laws. So I'm curious, maybe we could.
And I think we have to have the conversation beyond e-bikes because there's the e-scooters, the little single wheel things that people zip around on. there's so many variations now, and this is where I don't believe it's actually clear in statute, and that creates a huge challenge then for how do we build systems that keep that interaction safe.
I think with respect to time, I'll take the last question if you all don't mind. On page 23, it talks about the percent of sufficient bridges in the county. And it notes to me about this measure that the scale or the system is, the rating system is going to be different. Can you talk to me about the impacts of that? Any concerns regarding that?
Really no concerns regarding that. Basically, there was criteria before that classified a bridge as adequate or functionally obsolete, or 4 different categories. Now it's more of going to a planning index, so the local planning index, what it's called. It's on a scale from 1 to 9. And it's basically good, fair, or poor. So it's like 7 to 9 is good, 5 to 6 is fair, and 4 and below is poor. There's it's a little more detailed into the bridge itself, looking at the deck, the superstructure, the substructure, as well as the foundation. So it's the data, so we're behind on the data, so the MnDOT is still catching up with the FHWA standards, the federal highway. So it's not just going and inspecting a bridge and saying, oh, 9, that's good. There's several components where you're giving it these ratings, and incorporating like the load ratings, scour, the average daily traffic, those kinds of things are all taken into account to get your overall score. And there's some issues with that data in the background of the meter system, but overall, all of our bridges currently are in good shape, other than we have 6 bridges that are currently in our program to be replaced in the next 5 years. The load ratings on them have decreased, which we sign the roads, so they're still safe to drive as long as you're meeting the recommended tonnage that you're driving over.
Perfect. Thank
Joe,
you.
do you expect that rating will change your day-to-day operations or how you approach or the amount of bridges that we're gonna have to do something different with?
I don't, because this, like I said, all our bridges are in really good shape. The only thing that this system really changes for us is our inspectors that are inspecting them in the way they do that.
Thank you. And did anybody have any final comments that they thought later they want to add to something earlier before I turn it back to the board? All right. With that, Mr. Chair, open it up for questions from you all.
All right, thank you. We're now in the questions period. Anybody have questions or comments? Go ahead.
I don't know if I have a question really. I was writing notes through your discussion, and I think everyone that I have here starts with communication, because I feel that it's personal responsibility for safety, and then it's government to be involved in it. And so how do you communicate with, I guess I do have a question. How do you communicate with the community, or provide classes or training on the different topics that you have, so that people can be more aware, so that if something happens, it's just not a crisis, then they're responding in a crisis mode, but they're taking personal responsibility to take care of their own safety.
One example might be for emergency preparedness. We spent significant time over the last year in engaging our older adults and going into senior living communities to provide classes on emergency preparedness and community response, and providing some basic emergency preparedness supplies and like magnets around what to have ready to go in case of an emergency. So that's one way we're getting out and actually engaging with community to bring that information directly to them where they live.
Great. We also offer training on naloxone. We offer training on bystander CPR, stopping the bleed. So a lot of different skill building for individuals, so if something does happen, they can respond quickly and either keep the person alive until first responders can get there, or even prevent something worse from happening.
I would say from a traffic perspective, give a little shout out to Lisa Kona and her staff. We communicate with her whenever we have a issue where we need to do a repair to a traffic signal, maybe take the signal out of service for a few hours. We'll communicate that to her, and she'll put out a public notice or a social media post to people. And so she's been very good at that. From maybe a wider highway construction perspective, we maintain a website of all of our construction projects and let people know when detours are going to be into effect, when a project's scheduled to start. So that's an opportunity to inform motorists as well.
I love the question because it triggered a thought and an idea. When you use a personal watercraft on say Prior Lake, there's a requirement that there has to be a personal watercraft safety sticker adhered, and that has all the safety rules, who can operate the watercraft. You have to have a personal flotation device, and that's established in law. And as we were having our conversation about e-bikes and the challenges, it seemed like that would be a really replicable solution that we could push for in the future. Of like, we know we have these issues. We have a solution that we can replicate. You need to adhere a sticker that says these are the rules on an e-bike. It would be a simple way to solve some of that problems that we're experiencing on our roadways in the future. So appreciate the question. It spurred a thought that we'll have to follow up on.
One thing I want to add on the transportation perspective is you may have seen on Mondays driving around on highways 101 or 83, but we participate in what's called a Message Monday. I think that's the TZD organization that organizes that, but it's messaging that we put out on our DMS boards in regards to like buckling up or impaired driving, just to get messaging out to the traveling public about that.
I just want to add, we do communicate a lot of public health messages related to personal responsibility and providing that education, trying to increase people's resilience. The difficulty is, first of all, people need to hear something 6 to 10 times before it sinks in. And then how do you move from the education and communication to action? People, it took years and years. Now people automatically put their seatbelt on, but it took a lot, like years, to get people to build that into habits. So we keep repeating messages. We have a billboard on 169 of lots of different public health messaging. So a lot of communication is done, but the tricky part is getting people to take action. And we just continue to inundate with those with the messages and hope that people do the right thing or take action.
I think one of the difficult things with communication is how effective the communication is. We've had a lot of different strategies and putting out public safety messages over time, and there's been a lot of studies recently that have really challenged some of the ways we've been communicating, and it's things like one of the most effective things that we've actually had is, friends don't let their friends drive drunk. That was way more effective than if you drive drunk, you're going to go to prison, or if you drive drunk, you could kill somebody. That slogan, whoever came up with that at the national level and they understood that this is not about telling somebody, especially somebody who's been drinking, that you're in a dangerous state if you get behind the wheel. It's about, I'm going to make you my buddy, and I'm going to say, you know what, I don't want you to get hurt, so I'm going to pull your keys, or I'm going to make sure you get a taxi or an Uber, if there's taxis around anymore. The effectiveness of messages and communication is something that is really important to understand, because just messaging, in and of itself, a lot of our messages are falling on, really deaf ears, and we need to really think and be deliberate about how we deliver that message and be informed about the effectiveness of that messaging technique. There's ways to do it that historically in government we haven't always been right on how we message, and we post something and people don't read it, then we say, well, we tried. So being adaptive and understanding what the research says, what the new information is, and being willing to try things like Message Monday and look for effectiveness is really key.
And part of that is also tied into understanding the issue. And that's why we do such an in-depth community health assessment. Here's a problem, here's who it's a problem for. So there is no one-size-fits-all message, because if it's a problem for teens and a problem for seniors, those messages are very different. So it really is getting to understand who we're targeting, what the issue is, even if it's access, how they're accessing, and then trying to figure out what is the message for youth. And I don't write messages for youth. I'm totally out of touch, apparently. So we get the youth to write those messages. And then what's the problem for seniors, or who is it is a problem for? And so you might see 6 or 7 different messages about the same issue, but it's written just a little bit differently because we're trying to target a different audience and understanding what will resonate with that audience.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
This one's for the guy with the badge. So I'm on the road and there's 5 infractions right in front of me in like 3 minutes. And, you know, people sitting with their cell phone like this, and the only thing that, you know, made it kind of odd was there was a policeman in front of me who had to see at least 2 of them, and they did nothing. And so I always wonder, what triggers someone to pull, because I think it's still against the law to, isn't it, or to
We have
text
the
it?
hands-free law in Minnesota, so you.
Hands-free, but if they're like this, that's not hands-free anymore, right?
Definitely
Okay.
not.
What triggers someone, or to pull them over or not pull them over? And this was in Dakota County, but, so I'm sure that's what, but.
So I'll just say this, it's really individualized. Officers do have a lot of discretion on the enforcement action they take.
Mhm.
One of the things, we never got into the presentation, but there's the 4 E's of, towards zero death, and engineering enforcement is one of the other E's, education and EMS. Enforcement's been down since about 2020, when there was a cultural change in the state and across the nation. And there's a lot more risk for officers engaging in some enforcement activities. So culturally, things have changed. There's less enforcement, which probably has some impact on the increase in distractions that are coming out there. Because as we talk about a communication tool, what a great way to communicate to somebody that their behavior wasn't correct as to give them a fine or a ticket that creates a crisis in their life that makes them reevaluate their decisions. So, not knowing specifics of that situation, it may have been that the officer was on their way to a burglary report or to some other kind of an incident, and they were unable to make a traffic enforcement decision. Maybe they're going to lunch, I don't know, with the situation.
I don't know either, but.
But it's difficult. Like I said earlier, I frequently, driving from here to Prior Lake on my way home, I will see 3 to 4 infractions in different vehicles. There's a point in time when I'm never gonna make it home if I pull everybody over, ever make it home. There's so many violations on our roads right now, and I think we're seeing that impact in our numbers. We're seeing a lot more distracted drivers. We're seeing people who are.
Because if those numbers are going up, at some point, the real bad numbers are going to go up too.
Well,
Right.
as we look at the number of fatalities we had last year, it was, I think, a record-breaking year. That's way too many people died, and each one of those deaths is a family that's lost a loved one, but it's also a disruption much broader than that. So, yeah, each one of these lives matters, and unfortunately, we need to increase our ability to stop that behavior through all of our resources. It's difficult. I can tell you, officers are in a difficult situation. They may be busy trying to get to calls and provide service. But there's definitely a correlation between enforcement and people understand they're gonna get a ticket or they're gonna get stopped. They change their behavior. We've seen that. In my career, I saw that quite a bit. Increased enforcement reduced our DWI deaths. We were always in the top 13 counties in this of the state for most deadly counties for years. And then we did a lot of DWI enforcement, and all of a sudden we dropped out of that. Unfortunately, we're back into it now. It makes a difference. Improving the roads makes a difference, education makes a difference, enforcement makes a difference. But it has to be prioritized, and culturally, we have to, as a society, we have to support that enforcement. Because right now, it's not in many areas.
Go ahead.
I just, on the enforcement culture, I think as you called it, I just made a note, don't renew tabs until the cheaper tabs come in because I won't be pulled over.
Sadly, there's a lot of people who are taking the gamble because it's cheaper to get the ticket than it is to pay your tabs.
See, that's the viral moment we were looking for. We're gonna get tens and tens of viewers now. But yeah, so on the road side of it, I mean, I think our roads are amazing, generally. I mean, I know there's always gonna be a pothole here and there or whatever, but, it's funny, because I find myself, I'm right in that sandwich of like, I mean, I still have young-ish drivers, but they're all married off and, doing their own thing, and now I have grandkids, and so I'm like right in the middle of, they have my young drivers back in the day, have some experience, but my grandkids are, well, they're still young, but, so I want safe roads. I'm not gonna wrap them in bubble wrap either, so we have these weird intersections that was talked about. I call them the Bermuda intersections, they don't meet warrants necessarily, but for whatever reason, rise rates, of these intersections are just weird, and we typically do deal with those. And it was talked a little bit in the presentation, but when there's those roads, those intersections, even some that have been modified to have more right angle, better sight lines, what do we do? The numbers are going up, but if you look at those numbers, I forget what page it was, but, all of the different reasons that intersections, I think, was the highest bar on the left for fatalities and serious injuries, and then distracted driving, I was surprised, was way down, not the bottom, but it was like, what, third, fourth, fifth, sixth? Where I see a lot of people on phones. I'm still looking at the road, usually at an intersection, like, wow, it looks weird, to your point of, we bang, 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 wear your seatbelt, so it looks weird when someone isn't, or the hands-free, it looks weird when you see because I think we're getting there sort of, but then it also feels like, even seatbelts, like the younger generation needs a retake on that old mantra. But for our roads that don't necessarily meet the warrants, but they are just the Bermuda Straits, the Bermuda Triangle, for whatever reason, like, what do we do for that? How do we address those things, that personal responsibility, dealing with the numbers of like what created the issue? Was it DWI or, driving while intoxicated or whatever, or distracted? You can't build a road that's gonna fix that. You can't fix stupid.
Well, I think for some intersections, a signal may not be the answer, so meeting warrants may not be a matter in the situation. So I do know we have other tools in our toolbox for intersections that are problematic. We look at crash patterns to see what mistakes motorists are making, whether it be just misjudging gaps in traffic or whatnot. So besides traffic signals, we could, and we're doing this at several locations this year, implementing three-quarter intersections to prevent certain turn movements that seem to be the problem that cause the crashes. So that's one of the things we can do. Of course, we have roundabouts in the rural areas where we have high-speed crashes. So yeah, there's things we can do besides traffic signals to address a certain situation based on crash patterns that we're seeing and traffic volumes.
And I should be clear, like, I know we are doing things. It was more of just a question, like, I know we've done things at intersections where it's like, well, it doesn't quite meet the criteria, but these patterns are showing themselves. And for all kinds of different reasons, looking at this chart here, it's not necessarily one or the other. So I know that we do, which is awesome, because I think we need to do what we can, when it makes sense. So I just kind of wanted to ask that question to see. The other area is e-bike, and maybe I am forgetting this, but, like Prior Lake has been working on this for a while, with enforcement, because the state statute has been, and I think still is, sort of vague. And it's interesting, so they've been working on this, educating and now if they see someone, their officers are, hey, pulling people over, so to speak, or interjecting, let's make a call home, let's do some education. I don't think they're hauling them off to the slammer quite yet, but they're doing that education, enforcement and education. And it's a little interesting anecdotally, when I'm cruising through Marketplace, I'm not looking for scooters, but they pop up like, oh, I feel like there's more of these non-pedaled e-bikes, look like mini motorcycles for sale, so I feel like something's working. Are we doing anything, is our cities and jurisdictions doing anything scale-wise? Because I know more and more cities are doing this, and this to move this to a more common ground so that the vagueness in the statute is more similar across our county. And maybe that's already happening and I'm just not remembering that. But is that something that would make sense at a potential scale initiative to get everyone on the same page and remove any vagueness and makes the education easier, makes the mantra easier, makes the, you know.
So I think the answer is, are we? I don't believe we are currently. Is there an opportunity to do that? Absolutely. I think cities have independently been working to try and communicate the message out, and they're really working because they recognize the problem.
Right.
But there may be an opportunity to collaboratively go together and get everyone on some common messaging or to reinforce, because there are common audiences across all of our platforms. So I think there could be an opportunity to utilize that partnership already to enhance the messaging.
And they might be down the road on that already. But it might be something to look at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so fun to wait till last because I think you guys said most of what I wanted to say. So thank you. Just really interesting to see this group together and all the commonalities of what we're working on. I think my colleagues really hit on, I would love to see some collaborative, attempt at the communication, because you're making the same kind of communications. And I can see how easy it would be if I were in any of your shoes, that sometimes we're on our own, we're on our public health route, we're on our law enforcement route, sheriff route, and we're saying the same things in a little bit different ways, and I think it'd be great to coordinate that. So I know you don't need more work to do, but it sounds like a really good avenue that could save some work in the long term and hopefully impact some of these data points we're looking at. Yeah, the e-bike thing, I think a couple of us up here will remember to bring that to Scale Exec too, because I do think it's very, very ripe for a broader than just county type situation. Just when I think about the communication, and I know we rely on social media a lot and the scene a lot, and those are two very important things, but there's more than that. I just even love the thought about tree trimming, how important tree trimming is to community safety, and how are we promoting that, talking about, of course, what Joe's team does, but also what kind of personal responsibility we want others to have too, as we start thinking about storm seasons and things like that. So again, if we have some capacity to do more education and outreach, things like that are huge. E-bikes, talked about that. Really appreciate I love starting to see some 2025 data in these presentations, because even when we just get through 24, I'm like, well, what's changed since then? So great job for some of these slides, including 2025 data. And then public health nuisance, and that's been quite a journey, and I really appreciate all that, Lisa, you personally and your department have done in that issue, and love though how you're really creating a team, and that might, as we talk about staffing for that issue and stuff, it might need to continue to grow as a team versus this is public health's job. Maybe there's a team who's in charge of it. And I didn't see in the materials, but I'm not sure if environmental services are involved kind of in the team part of it. Good, because I know there's just so many disposal type issues with those. So again, no questions, I guess, just comments. Thanks to my colleagues for crossing things off my list.
Thank you. I want to make a comment here. I'll zero in on one category. I'm on the Transportation Advisory Board in the Twin Cities. A couple $100 million comes into the region every couple of years, and we decide how it's going to be spent and so forth. And one big topic all the time is safety. How can we make our roads more safe? And we've talked about that here today, and what are the elements of safety? How can we make, whether it's signage or painting the roads or whatever it is to make the roads more safe. It's very important. But it's also discussed that if somebody's going 20 miles over the speed limit, there's nothing you can do to make that road safe. When you've got a mix of people driving 60 and some going 80, 85, which I believe you could sit on 169 and see 80 every 15 minutes at least, every 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. And so, and then the distracted driving, the phones and all that stuff we've talked about. But we are communicating in the region, in the state. We're not gonna enforce that. We're gonna just let that fly. I mean, 169 through our community is a racetrack every morning. I mean, every morning it's a racetrack. I mean, and on 169 going north, if you're going 60, you're gonna get run over. I mean, because it's 70, 80, 85, and I'm not a slow driver. But I do draw the line at like about 7 miles over, or, and if I'm not paying attention, it could be 10 miles over, but I'm getting zipped by, like crazy, so true confession there. But this is just this Safe Roads Coalition. That's just, it says next step, revitalize that. Well, what I want you to think about here is there are clusters of topics here that you've talked about, are clusters of activity or operations like this one, Safe Roads, where, yeah, that should be revitalized, but a commissioner probably should be a new committee assignment for commissioner. Or let's say emergency preparedness or emergency management. I sat on that kind of committee for more than 10 years when I first became, that's not a commissioner assignment anymore that I'm aware of. But anyhow, that may be another cluster where, where you could educate the board, you could educate commissioner. I think that there are certain categories here you should analyze and say, okay, should a commissioner be in part of this so they can be an advocate for what's going on or what needs to go on, and also educated and so forth in these categories. And I'm going to let you analyze, where those would be. But I think Safe Road Coalition would definitely be one where that could occur.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that. Do we hear that it kind of sounded like there's two Safe Road committees going. You guys talked about something and let's make sure we don't have two.
We're on the same one.
Oh, it's the same one. Okay. The way you said it was a little different. Good. I'm glad. Thank you.
Any other comments or? All right, well, thank you. And I know you've got an ongoing battle with everything structural you're trying to do, and then you're trying to have compliance or safe activity by the public, and I know that's a tension and a battle, so thanks for fighting it. Yeah, thank you. All right, we're on to 8.1, is to receive a financial update for first quarter 2026 and year-end close it of 2025. That's what we're on to now. And I think is Steve Jones, Steve's going to be our presenter.
I'm here to go through a year-end update. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to go through the update on our year-end 2025, and then also to do a review of our quarter one 2026 and what we're looking at for variances at this time. So I was last here in April to go through our year-end results. We have had one significant change from that update in April, and that is that we had to make just over a $300,000 payment to the state of Minnesota for an excess revenue payment to us from the state related to the Adult Mental Health Initiative Program. And that payment was made back in 2022. And what happened there is within that program, we have more than enough expenses to claim the revenue that came into us. But unfortunately, the allocation that the state divvied up for for Scott County was lower than what the state actually paid us. So we always submit to them our full expenses. They exceeded the payment to us of the allotment through their system. Unfortunately, the timing was bad for us because we did have some staffing changes there. And looking at the expenses and revenue, it did not look off to us at the time. But the state has come back to us, and Barb and her staff researched it and determined that it was an excess payment from the state. So we did have to pay that back to the state.
think we have a question here.
Thank you. Well, obviously, that's very disappointing, but I want to make sure, will that impact their error rate to us? Just
what?
asking for a friend.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, I
Just
don't
mark that
believe they
down.
track that
Mark
at
that
all.
down. Their error rate is pretty high on that one, so we'll have to take it out some other way.
And we were not alone as the only county that had a overpayment on that, so it's not we weren't the only exception they had there, but again, with the new systems, it should improve this process in the future, but. And then some other updates for you. Looking overall, we have a $4.9 million favorable variance. From April, I had explained the biggest favorable variance we had was investment earnings, and our largest unfavorable variance was our property tax collections. Michael Thompson and his staff have done some research into what drove some of those changes. And one thing that was determined is that we have seen a larger increase in tax petitions. And some of the reasons behind that is in the 2022 through 2023 tax process, we had a higher than normal increase to property values. And with that, that brought in more tax petitions in 2023 and 2024. And it takes about 2 years for a tax petition to go through the full tax court process. So we, in 2025, started paying and paid most of those tax petitions. And unfortunately, that ended up having about a $500,000 impact to our taxes. Now, going forward, we're still seeing an increase in the number of tax petitions. Some of that is driven by, there has been a real there's been an encouragement to hire county assessors and appraisers, and developers have brought those on staff to help with their processing of property valuation. Well, now they are looking to do more tax petitions when they feel that there's a contest of the actual value itself. And then the other part of this is because the tax petition process takes on average 2 years, it ends up being multiple years that we have to pay back. So even though the tax petition could be for 23 or 24, it's taking into account the years 23, 24, and 25 that we end up having to pay back in the settlements there. So it is something that we need to pay attention to moving forward and maybe start budgeting for it if it continues at the rate that it is or that it was for 2025. So that's the update I have on the 2025 financials. From there, updated the fund balance graph as of year end. We are still at 39%. We went from 40% down to 39% of our operating expenditures, which is still within the Office of State Auditors guidelines of 35 to 50%. So we're still within our guidelines there. We still have had 2 consecutive years of increases to our fund balance and moving us into a better position within those guidelines. Now from year end, I'll move into the first quarter fiscal update. And with the first quarter, because a lot of our financials have not come through in the first 3 months, we do a high level to see where are we sitting at this time. And at this time, we still have investment income coming in at a higher level with increased interest rates still. We're still seeing rates between 3.5 and 3.7%, which is causing a favorable variance to us. One thing all of us are experiencing is there is increased fuel costs, And with that, with Scott County, for every quarter increase in fuel costs, it costs the county $75,000. In 2026, we've been averaging about 75 cents more than what we were paying in 2024. So right now, we're looking at about a $225,000 unfavorable variance there. And then the last item that I have for variances is we are working with Dakota County, and we do have planned fund balance usage to pay for the construction of a regional household hazardous waste facility in Lakeville. So this will take down our fund balance, but it's restricted funds and it is planned. And then other areas that we're watching at this time, it's nice that the state completed their legislative session, so some of these uncertainties will clear up for us. But at this time, there's state and federal funding uncertainties, and we'll get more information from the final work that was done at the state. And at the same time, we're waiting on our first quarter payments, grant payments from the state and federal government to see where are we on our reimbursements so that we can really project the rest of the year. And then the last item goes back to what we experienced in 2025 with the tax petitions. Just keep an eye on what's occurring in 2026, and do we need to start budgeting for some dollars to cover some of these results of tax petitions in the 27 budget and moving forward. That covers the forecast or the items that we're reviewing at this time. And now the last item is going through the investment results for the first quarter. So the investments that Scott County held at the end of March, 87% of all of our investments were in maturities of 0 to 2 years, so the shortest term we have. 3 to 5 years, we had 5% of our funds, and then the greater than 5-year maturity, we had 8% of our money invested. Looking at the overall investments themselves, due to the interest rates of 3.5 to 3.7%, the vast majority of our funds, 77%, is in the money markets. And then we have 19% sitting in government agencies or securities. And then we have 1% in CDs. And again, investing short-term and in very secure investments. Now looking at our yield curve, the black line on the graph represents where the interest rates were at March 31st of 26. The gray line is the interest rates as of December 31st of 2025. And then the blue line represents December 31st, 2015. The change in the interest rate is pretty minor between the end of 2025 and March 31st. You have about a 3.3% increase in our investments rate around the 2-year and 3-year term. Otherwise, it's all smaller than that. So just a slight uptick in interest rates in the past quarter. Now looking at our 6-month US Treasuries, again, we're just seeing a real slight increase from last quarter. Overall, since 2023, we've seen rates decreasing here, but in the last quarter, we did see about a 25 basis point increase in these investments. And again, with the economy looking to be going into inflationary times, you could see increased rates, but these are not normal times, so I don't know what's really going to happen with interest rates here. And then the last one is looking at our 10-year US Treasury rates. Again, in the last quarter, there was just a very slight increase in the rates, And for the past 3 years, interest rates have held pretty steady in that right around a 4% interest rate level. With that, are there any questions of the board?
Any questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're on to item 9, which is Commissioner reports and updates, and we'll start with Commissioner Brecky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I want to say that within the last week, I went to the household hazardous waste facility, and I got there right at opening, and there was a line of cars so long. So it was good to see people are using it. I came back later in the day and was able to drive right in, but staff are just doing a great job. I know it was a busy day there. I think residents are using it. I've just seen, and it'll be interesting to see May statistics, because it seems like a real uptick in activity over there. So May 5th was our last board meeting, had a workshop after that meeting. May 6th through 8th, I was out of town at the NACO Western Interstate Region Conference. That conference brought together what are known as Western states and Minnesota, I guess. Somehow we got involved. But the topics really were around disasters and emergency preparedness. And I even think our discussion today even made me more, I guess, energized to look at that area. I think the work we're doing in talking with Dakota and Carver counties about doing some joint work on that, it was, I'm even a bigger believer of that after this conference, and hearing from those states and counties who dealt with, severe wildfires and floods, and how helpful it was for them to be doing that work more regionally, because depending on the disaster, sometimes we can't do it. We need our neighbors. We need to be doing that together. So I'm really proud and happy with the discussions already started to share those resources and do some of that work collaboratively. Also, Scott said something today about partnerships and how that's just a way of life. And I think that in hearing from counties who dealt with significant disasters, that was made very clear, that those partnerships in place, even with places like restaurants and food providers, kept the county or the government agencies from having to create systems and processes, and that was a lot of the teachings at the conference about we should be doing that, not creating a plan for how we feed people, house people, take care of pets, whatever, but actually working with those partners so that, they're not gonna be ready to go like this, but hopefully we don't have a disaster like that either. So coming back and then this weekend with the fires we've had in Minnesota, it really brings it home. May 7th, when I was out of town, I did participate in the Long-Term Services and Supports Eligibility Work Group meeting. That was prior to the end of session, where we were still working on identifying savings in that area and hoping the legislature would give us credit for the savings they were adopting this session. They didn't do that. May 12th had CAP board meeting. May 13th, MICA board meeting, which of course being right before the last days of session, that was the focus. May 14th, went up to the Capitol with lots of commissioners from around Minnesota, thanks to those of you who were able to be there to try and make some last minute pushes with our legislators. I think it was important. We'll talk about that in a minute. May 14th and 15th, AMC Futures event. Barb Dahl's also on that group with me. I think the best part of the 2-day workshop for me had to do with our second day. I don't even remember the organization that was there, but a gentleman presenting information about partisanship, the divide, different things, and being in a group of commissioners and senior staff from around the state who we're really able to talk about the difference in values about some of the programs we offer, and if recipients are deserving and what that means. And, so often we don't create the rules about who gets things, but we often have some value thoughts about that. And around this table and with our staff, we have different values on it. and to be able to talk about that in a way that's not judgmental and accusing, it was good. So I wonder where that's gonna go. I think we're gonna follow up on that more. May 15th, Scale Executive Committee. Also, May 15th, had another Long-Term Services and Supports County meeting. May 17th, Sunday, last day of session, spent several hours up there that evening. And I would say, Sunday till today, of course, there's been periods of disappointment that more of our priorities didn't happen, but also some gratitude, because I think based on the makeup of the legislature this year, the things that have happened, and what we were seeing late next week, we could have got to Sunday night with not a bill passing. And that would have been tremendously awful. I know sometimes we wish things went past, but there were things that needed to pass that would have made our work hard, that if they didn't, our work would have been harder and people would have been hurt. So most appreciative for the modernization money that was allocated, but even more so than the money, the actual structure where all of us counties will have some input in seeing, at least seeing where that money is gone, where in the past that money just went away, with reports about it being done. So that is in the bill. There was some folks who wanted to take that out. So glad that stayed. Small bits with SNAP admin costs, some Medicaid support for the work requirements. So there were things in there that make the worst case scenarios we talked about in that room not long ago for our budget next year, a little bit less worst case. That's what we accomplished. That's my summary of it. Since Sunday, what'd I do? Yesterday, AMC legislative update, and yesterday also had a meeting with county stakeholders about direct care and treatment. Really a lot of conversation about that agency and our connection with it and how we can have more influence over them providing the services that I think we need in counties more, not just the services happening at the state hospital. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the 5th, met with Elko New Market Mayor and Administrator, and our Administrator, Leslie Vermillion. Had a nice conversation about some development happening out there. That evening, New Market Township met. On the 7th, met with Prior Lake, the Mayor and Administrator of that, also with Commissioner Bureau and our Administrator. On the 8th scale, talked about the trails. On the 11th, Planning and Zoning met, and very well attended that night. They want to put a gravel pit over by the Sioux Vista on, what is that, Beaumont?
Beaumont.
Yeah, Beaumont. About a half mile from the Scott County Fairgrounds, and it would save the guy that wants to open it $2 million of moving gravel to and from the new project at 282 and 169 and 9. So they tabled that until the next meeting. Unfortunately, there was 3 of the planning and zoning commissioners that were missing, and I don't know how they're gonna catch up on that, unless, I hope they watched the video, so. On the 12th, we had Prior Lake, their twice monthly meeting. On the 13th, MESB met. One of the big things there is they're doing a lot of school planning and mapping, that if there's something happens at a school, everybody that's involved with law enforcement and fire, whoever, knows the layout of the school. Also into the Capitol after that to, I don't know if it would be strong arming, but just trying to persuade some of our legislators to move a few things along for us. On the, also that afternoon, I-35 Solutions had a finance committee meeting. That next day, the 14th, had I-35 Solutions, went over some of the hot spots in the Twin Cities and some progress on some of the projects going on now. That night, Spring Lake Township met and Elko New Market. And then on last night, 18th, Credit River had their meeting. One of the things they brought up was e-bikes and what they're gonna do and how they're, what kind of laws and rules and where they can go and where they can't go, and signing and things like that. So that is my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Brennan?
Thank you. February 5th, or February, gosh, May 5th, I attended the Shakopee City Council meeting. The council approved changes to the TIF at the Shakopee gravel pit. The EDA had a presentation on the updated Canterbury Development Concept Plan. May 6th was the meeting with the courts and judges. May 6th was also the Park Advisory Council. The board had a planning workshop on the Blakely Bluffs Regional Park. May 8th was Scale. May 12th was the Scott County CD Day. The CDA has sold 2 homes at the Marine Edition in Shakopee, and a third one is being looked at. Ribbon cutting is scheduled for May 27th, so next week. Staff has also presented the quarterly housing report, which included update on Bring It Home program. The CDA will be starting on their strategic plan, and they will be meeting with us on June 2nd. May 13th was my MICA meeting, and that was a legislative update, and after that, I went to the Capitol. May 14th was the Prairie Point opening. The 42 units of that building are now occupied, and they just opened in January, so it was quickly filled. May 15th was the Dakota Scott Workforce Board. Tim Zunker from the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce presented on Career Lift and the program eligibility assessment. May 18th was the AMC legislative update. May 18th was also the Health and Human Services Resource Council. The council had an update on housing, Drive for 5 initiative, the closeout of the 2025 budget, as well as the legislative update. And I just want to say that I appreciate the commissioners and our staff for the work that they did over the last couple months with our legislators and trying to get our top priorities the same as their top priorities. I know it was a challenge, but I really appreciate the work that everybody has done. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Beer?
Thank you very much. As mentioned, 5-5, post-board workshop. 5-7, had a constituent meeting, then also met with Tony from Hart. And then later that evening, Prior Lake Quarterly, always good to keep open lines. I mean, we talk on a regular basis outside of that, but it's just good to have that quarterly ongoing, as we do with many of our jurisdictions. That evening, I was able to get to the Friendship Church. They do a National Day of Prayer service that I've never been able to get to, so I was able to do that. Well attended and just a nice little respite there. The 8th Scale, 5/12, May 12th, a fish program committee. Then that morning, also the AFSCME labor meeting. That evening, Prior Lake, their work session and city council, as was mentioned, they're twice monthly. 13th, was able to get in on the Police Week barbecue across the street. Always good to see the grill master extraordinaire at work, to see just great to celebrate the brown and blue that keep us safe on an ongoing basis. The 14th, AMC on the Hill, yet again, kind of that last push. Had a lot of good conversations. Feel like I've made a lot more relationships where you can have those sidebar conversations. As Commissioner Weckman-Brecky talked about, did we get everything we wanted? No, we normally don't. And it is funny, the end of session reports, hey, rah, 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 and it's like, I'm not sure if it was rah, rah, rah. Worst case scenario, no, but you can see it from there, sort of, is how I would put it. And there is a disconnect. I feel like I heard more commentary from both, from the legislators directly, not hearsay, but a lot of them talking about in terms of, there was a transportation thing we kind of kicked off session and talked about, with all these EVs, we're losing our revenue, from a state representative and a state senator talking about, like somehow it's their revenue. How do we tax? And look, I'm not against taxes. I know that's a shocker. It's the excessive tax, which just drives me nuts, and it's not sustainable. So there's this mentality, I really saw that on display this year, is this legislators, representatives and senators talking in terms of their revenue. It's not their revenue. They're there for the people. And I also had, this is not a new thing, but some of the delegation saying, why are you not maximizing your wheelage tax? Scott County, you're not maxing out you could be taxing more when people are renewing their tabs, which I don't think I have to remind people that they're crazy high. And they want us to increase our wheelage tax to max that out. I'm like, I can't do that. It's not sustainable. I can't do that. It's not sustainable. We're taxing people to death. Don't be so proud of your low tax rate, Scott County. I'm like, and then it was a reminder, hey, it's not as low as it used to be because there's things we've had to make up for because of mandates from the state. So it's not that low anymore. So, and there's just a disconnect on, with some of our folks, which, right, that's the human condition. But that seemed to be more on display this year, or I don't know if I was more acutely aware of that. And still trying to have, and maintain civil discourse, which I think we did. The F and hammers come my way from time to time, but it's like, okay, let them fly, and then let's get back to business and talk about things at hand that make it better for our people. Blue or red, it doesn't matter, it's still our people, and trying to figure that out. So, that's where we're at. Later that afternoon, sped down and caught the very end of the Prairie Point ribbon cutting. It's there, it's in full effect. I wasn't there for much of it, but have been open. Let's see here. Then, so again, 15th, wedding weekend started on Friday. So baby girl got married. Can you believe she got married in Carver County? My other two got married in Scott County at Horse and Hunt and an apple orchard. But so much so, we're having what are we having on June 9th? I think it is where is it here? Yeah, June 9th, another joint meeting with Carver County. So I love my colleagues in Carver County, so she got married over there. Anyway, I was a little busy, and I know there was an email that came out late in the day on Friday, so I spent much of Sunday and Monday catching up on Department of Commerce things, talking with some of our mayors and our delegations, members from our delegation to say, what in the world? I know we're going to be talking more about that. So there's lots flying over the weekend. On the 18th, let's see, had the AMC debrief, kind of hear from them, what their take was, and, kind of called it for what it was, seemingly rosy, but not quite as rosy. And I know we've had our own discussions in and amongst ourselves, and this morning signed up to vote for more beer. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. On the 5th, I attended the board workshop. The 6th, the monthly meeting with Leslie Vermillion. The 9th through 16th, I was out of town. The 18th, the service delivery. Big topic was the insurance pool. Some things that were kind of surprising from Carver. Obviously, Carver referred to the no weighted voting as sort of a deal breaker. But I asked Dave Hemsey, okay, beyond that, do you know your board's position, or do you know your union's positions on the insurance pool? He did not. And it was also thought that they would be discussing the insurance pool today, because I don't think they even knew that the weighted voting was off the table. By that time, they'd have to schedule their agenda for their board meeting, but it wasn't even on their agenda to talk about today, which is kind of surprising. Okay, the Suburban Transit Association, same on the 18th, and the Fish Executive Committee on the 18th. We now have Rachel Residence as the executive director and Tasha Vitale as the support staff person. And this morning, a new employee greeting. That's the end of my report. County Administrator update.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was going to echo on one of Commissioner Brennan, the Moraine ribbon cutting on the 27th. Just a reminder, that was ARPA funds that constructed that and got that going. It was excess right-of-way from the bypass project that had sat there. So putting that land to good use and helping to move part of that housing continuum forward. It was a little different look on the housing, so very positive. I also wanted to thank, I think, Jake and Perry, who put in a lot of time down at the legislature, orchestrating meetings, letters, press releases, and Barb Dahl for her testimony as well. I would still say that a lot of that system modernization started in a room in Dakota County with Olmsted and Carver, or Olmsted, Scott, and Dakota, and Carver and Ramsey later. But Barb's understanding of that and really pushing that, I think, was instrumental. I'm not as positive as Commissioner Brecky on the committee. I still would have liked to have seen Department of Revenue and DPS and some other folks involved in it, because I think we are missing an opportunity for that runway and how we interconnect these systems, but maybe there's a chance next year that we can get some of that done as we continue to move forward. So we are taking a look at the budget impacts, and we'll have that information, in your first budget meeting in June. So there were some positive things that help us from that dismal outlook we had for you a few weeks ago. So I think that is the end of my report, unless you want to take a look at some bear pictures. It was a good week, so thank you.
Thank you. Item 11 would be recess for attorney-client meeting.
We do not, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, thank you. We're about to adjourn, but I'll note that we're going to have a workshop on the insurance pool, next steps or recommendations, and then summary and input on nonprofits. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion, a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.